Good evening, my dear students. This is Mrs. Sohir Zaki, and we are going to explain our third unit in our science curriculum for Prep 2 students second term. Let's start our session for today. In our session today, we are going to start the third unit in our science curriculum with the title of Reproduction in Living Organisms. Our first lesson in our third unit is the floral reproduction. Let's start by our lesson objectives. By the end of our lesson, you will be able to identify the life cycle of flowering plants, identify the structure of a typical flower. Also, by the end of our lesson, you will be able to explain the functions of floral rules, distinguish between the processes of pollination and fertilization in the flowers. Also, you will be able to differentiate between self-pollination and cross-pollination. Identify the different means of pollen grain transfer. In our lesson also, and by the end of this lesson, you will be able to compare the characteristics of wind-pollinated flowers and those pollinated by insects. Now let's begin to learn what is meant by pollination and fertilization in flowers. We will start to learn about pollination at first. Reproduction by seeds is one of the most important factors that has contributed to the widespread of flowering plants. The transfer of pollen grains from the anthers of the stamens to the stigmas of the carpels or the so-called pistils is known as pollination process. So, what is meant by pollination? Pollination is the process in which pollen grains transfer from the anther of the flower to the stigma of the flower. To learn more about pollination, we will do the second activity in our lesson, and in this activity we will try to observe and conclude what is the pollination. We will start by studying these two figures, figure 20 and figure 21. These two figures illustrate the two main types of pollination that occur in flowering plants of the same species. So figure 20 is one of the two types of pollination, and figure 21 is the other type. In our activity, try to answer this question. How does the pollination process shown in each figure take place? Let's try to observe the first figure. In the first figure, figure 20, we have two separate plants, and the pollen grain transfers from this plant to the second one. This is the first type of pollination. In figure 21, we have only one plant, and we observe that the pollen grain transfer from one flower to another flower on the same plant. So this is the other type of pollination. Let's explain more what happens during pollination process and what are the types of pollination. Types of pollinations are cross-pollination and self-pollination. Let's explain each one of them. We will start by cross-pollination. Cross-pollination takes place in figure 20. By observing figure 20, cross-pollination occurs when pollen grains are transferred from the anther of a flower on one plant to the stigma of a flower on another plant or another individual of the same species, as you can see here in figure 20. So this type of pollination is called cross-pollination. Flowers that undergoes cross-pollination are characterized by certain features. What are the features that must be exist in the flowers undergo cross-pollination? Let's explain these features together. The first feature, the stamens and pistils don't mature at the same time. So, it could be a bisexual flower, but the stamens mature at first and the pistils be late, or the reverse, pistils mature first and the stamens are late. So stamens and pistils in this type of flowers don't mature at the same time. The second feature exists in flowers that undergo cross-pollination is anthers are positioned far from stigmas or at lower level from stigmas. You can see here stigma is much higher than the position of the anthers. The third feature that exists in the cross-pollinated flowers is the flowers are unisexual. It means that the flowers are only female flowers or male flowers. In female flowers, there is only the pistil, and in male flowers, there are only the stamens. So, in this case, the flowers undergo cross-pollination. The second type of pollination is self-pollination. Self-pollination occurs when pollen grains are transferred from the anther to the stigma of the same flower or to the stigma of another flower but on the same plant as in the figure 21. Also, in case of self-pollinations, flowers that undergo self-pollinations are characterized by certain features. The first one, simultaneous maturity of the stamens and the pistils. They are grow and mature in the same time. Also, in case of self-pollination, flowers that undergo self-pollination are characterized by anthers are at the same level as or slightly higher or even slightly higher than stigma, as you can see here in this figure. Anthers are in the same level or slightly higher than stigma to allow self-pollination. The third feature that exists in flowers undergo self-pollination. In some cases, the flower remains closed and doesn't open until pollination is completed. Now let's discuss together and learn about the methods of pollination. Flowering plants depend on several methods to transfer the pollen grains, including insects, water, and humans. What are the characteristics of wind-pollinated flower? The petals are small, as you can see here in the figure. The petals are small and dull colored. They have not bright color in case of wind-pollinated flower. The second feature, they are usually scentless and don't produce nectar. So since this type of flower are wind-pollinated flowers, they are usually scentless and don't produce nectar. Also, in case of wind-pollinated flower, their anthers are long and hang outside the flower, as you can see here, making them easy to shake by the wind, as in figure 22. Also, in case of wind-pollinated flower, their pollen grains are light, dry, and smooth, and are produced in large quantities to compensate for losses in the air. So the pollen grains are light, dry, and smooth, and have very large numbers to compensate the loss that may occur in the air. Also, from the characteristics of wind-pollinated flower, their stigmas are feathery, sticky, and often exposed outside the flower to trap pollen grain. Now let's learn about the characteristics in case of insect-pollinated flowers. In this type of pollination, the flower depends on insects to transfer the pollen grains from the anther to the stigma. So the flower must attract the insect to allow the pollen grain to transfer by insect from one flower to the other, or from the anther to the stigma, and allow pollination process to take place. So what are the characteristics of insect-pollinated flowers? So the first character, their petals are large with bright colors, as you can see here in figure 23. They have a noticeable scent and secrete nectar to attract insects. Also, their anthers are located inside the flower due to the short filament. You can see here how the anthers exist inside the flower because of short filament, and the bee go into the flower to absorb the nectar of the flower, and this allow the bees to transfer the pollen grain from this flower to another flower. Also, from the characteristics of insect-pollinated flowers, pollen grains are sticky or rough, and this allowing them to adhere to the bodies of visiting insects. When this insect visits the flower, the pollen grains stick on the hair of this insect, and when the insect flies from one flower to the other, the pollen grain transfer from the anther to the stigma. Another character of the insect-pollinated flower, the stigmas are sticky and located inside the flower to pick up pollen stuck to insects' bodies. Now let's learn these cross-cutting concepts, structure, and function. Light, smooth pollen grains are usually transported by wind, whereas sticky or rough pollen grains are commonly transferred by insects. So, there are different characters of pollen grains in case of wind. In case of wind pollinated flower, the pollen grains are light, smooth, and in large numbers, as we have mentioned before, while in case of insect pollinated flowers, the pollen grains are sticky or rough to allow the attaching of the pollen grains to the hair of the insects. Now, dear students, let's examine our understanding and choose the correct answer in this question. The figure illustrates the structure of a flower. Which of the following describes this flower? Bisexual, insect pollinated. Unisexual, wind pollinated. Unisexual, insect pollinated. Bisexual, wind pollinated. Let's try to study this figure and choose the correct answer. About the sex of the flower, By observing this figure, we can notice the existence of the pistil and the stamen. So the flower here is a bisexual flower. What about the type of pollination in this flower? You can see here that the stamen are hanging outside the flower, and in this case the flower is a wind pollinated flower. So the flower is bisexual and wind pollinated flower, and our choice is D. Now, based on your study on the types of pollination, try to mention the type of pollination in each of the following cases. Number 1, the androecium and gynoecium mature at the same time. If the male part and the female part in the flower mature at the same time, this allows, of course, self-pollination to take place. Number 2, the anthers are far from the stigmas or at a higher level than them. So, in this case, the cross-pollination takes place. Number 3, all flowers are unisexual. This is the feature exists in case of cross-pollination. So, in case of all flowers are unisexual, the pollen grain transfers from the male flower to the female flower, and this is of course the cross-pollination. Number 4, flowers remain closed and don't plump until pollination. So it must be the self-pollination type in this case that takes place inside the closed flower, and after pollination the flower can be plump. Now examine your understanding of the type of pollination by completing this table. We have the aspect of comparison for the insect pollination and the wind pollination, and we have different points of comparison, which are the color of petals, the size of petals, the scent and nectar, the anthers, the pollen grains, and the stigmas. Let's begin by the first point of comparison, which is the color of petals. In case of insect pollination, the petals are colorful to attract the insects. In case of wind pollination, the color of petals is dull because there is no need to have a bright color to attract the insects. The second aspect is the size of petals. In case of insect pollination, the petals have large size, while in case of wind pollination, the petals are small. What about the scent and nectar? In case of insect pollination, the petals are scented and the flowers secrete nectar to attract insects to absorb this nectar and allow insect pollination. While in case of wind pollination, there is no scent or secretion of nectar because there is no need to attract insects. Let's move to the fourth point, which is the anthers. What is the description of anther in case of insect pollination? In case of insect pollination, the anther is short and located inside the flower. What about in case of wind pollination? In case of wind pollination, the anthers are long and hanged outside the flower to allow the pollen grain to be spread into the air and allow wind to carry these pollen grains from the flower to another by wind. What about the description of pollen grains? This is the next point of comparison. In case of insect pollination, the pollen grains are sticky or rough to allow the pollen grains to attach to the insects and allow the insects to carry these pollen grains from the anther of the flower to the stigma of a flower. So, in case of insect pollination, the pollen grains are sticky or rough. In case of wind pollination, the pollen grains are dry, light, and produced in a very large number to compensate the loss that may occur by wind. So it must be dry and light to be carried easily by wind, and as the wind may cause the loss of many of these pollen grains, they are produced in very large number. Let's move to the last point of comparison in our table, which is the stigma. And let's describe the stigma in the two cases. Starting by the insect pollination, the stigma is sticky and located inside the flower. What about the wind pollination? In case of wind pollination, the stigma is feathery, sticky, and exposed outside the flower to catch the pollen grains carried by the wind. So, in this table, we compared between insect pollination and wind pollination according to these points of comparison: the color of petals, the size of petals, the scent and nectar, the anthers, the pollen grains, and stigmas. This is the Ministry of Education live stream platform. See you next session, inshallah.